Hey, Bob.
Hello.
How's it going?
Good, good. Hi.
Hey,
Hello.
greetings from San Antonio.
How
You're
you doing?
Close the door.
You're up on a projector, so is it cool if we go a little bit dark?
Oh, yes, sure.
Cool. So,
So Joseph, I was just talking to some of your future workmates.
Antoine and
yeah,
yeah, great guys.
yeah. I just happened to have another call with them a little earlier, and they were mentioning their shared connection with you.
That's cool. Yeah, it's exciting. I just joined Consensus, and so I'll start soon, I think. Is it?
Nice.
Yeah. So what projects are you working on right now?
So my day job is I am blockchain lead for a company called Quant Fury, who are doing a mobile trading app. So so you're basically doing trading in conventional markets or crypto. So crypto funded. So you're basically funding, a mobile app with Bitcoin or Ether or whatever, and then you're getting zero cost trading. So basically no spreads, no fees, leverage, uniform trading power, and access to a bunch of markets. So kind of, I guess, a bit like Robinhood kind of deal, but better. That's the day job. I'm sort of at the beginnings of a couple of possible advisory kind of things. One of which is would be working with Greg Colvin and Boris Mann on stuff around evolution of the EVM, because you really had kind of like, if you go back to DevCon last year, you'd got, well, is it going to be like EVM 1.5? Is it going to be an incremental thing, or is it going to be EWASM? And it's kind of like everything got like dropped for EWASM, and then it's like, yeah, we're not going to do that yet. Like, it's probably going to be a couple of years, and then it's like, okay, so we've just thrown away a year of not doing simple maintenance work, and Greg's kind of not being paid, and it would be quite good to have him like doing work. He's quite competent. So anyway, picking that one up again. And just, Ethereum community stuff, and Crypto Chicks I'm involved with as well. I'm the community ambassador for Crypto Chicks, who are a Toronto-based non-profit sort of educational hub, targeting basically educational stuff primarily for women, of really trying to get a bit more gender diversity. And one of the co-founders is Vitalik's mum. So that's
cool.
Yeah. So the first conference they had in Toronto in April was the first panel where his mum and dad were both on a panel. So Dimitri and Natalia, and it was a panel on encouraging entrepreneurial activity in your children. So I think they did quite a good job. They probably know a bit about that.
Totally.
So yeah, that's me. The other thing, I ran for the Hyperledger Technical Steering Committee as well. I was not elected, but I've been doing ongoing Hyperledger EEA stuff for years. So it was just like so awesome to see that announcement the other day. That they're joining each other as associates of each other, because really, like this kind of view of Hyperledger and Ethereum as being, like rivals is just not really, it's way oversimplified. The EEA is a standards body. Hyperledger is an umbrella for open source blockchain projects, including EVMs. It's really been that there hasn't been enough Ethereum in Hyperledger, and then EEA as a standards body has only had Ethereum. So it's kind of like, the two of them should fit together, but it's kind of like not being quite the right shape, but it's really getting there now. So I'm really quite hopeful actually that the EA is going to over time become more of a like enterprise blockchain standards kind of body and cover all protocols really. And that on the Hyperledger side, you know, you're going to get that, you know, really sort of less IBM dominated. You're going to get more other bits in there, and it'll all be like, hey, you know, this isn't a zero-sum game. It's all fine. People are just exploring different, you know, different engineering trade-offs. It's like you don't have to have winners and losers. We're all just trying to build decentralized systems. So yeah, I just do tons of stuff, just talking to a load of people, really. I guess, you know, when I joined the foundation, that was after 18 years in the games industry. And, you know, as a developer, you know, I've built products all my life. And that's why I joined the foundation, you know, as a C++ developer. But then somehow I found myself like in a bunch of people who are like really bad at talking to other people, you know, like real introverty, you know, folk. So I find myself in a position of like being the bridge and not actually doing a lot of development. Anyway, let me do my brief presentation and then we can have a chat, I guess. So if you have that first video, which is the your turn one.
Okay. Let me cue that up.
It begins as an idea, transforming into a problem that begs to be solved. Like a great cycle, each answer yields another peak. The vista promises more beautiful ends, and the new journey pushes us forward. We have our builders, our visionaries, the rebels, the troublemakers, and the dreamers. Then we arrive at a new peak. With more dreamers, more builders, a few more rebels, and of course, we still have the troublemakers. Some journeys are coming to a noble end, and some.
So yeah, the other videos for the end. But, so yeah, that was called Ethereum Your Turn. It was done in, I think, about April 2014. You know, really early days before you even had the foundation. So I don't know. Can any of you recognize who the voiceover is?
I don't know. No guesses.
It is the evil Charles Hoskinson, who's
really?
not evil, but it's Charles. That's Charles's voice over there. Yeah. They did some great videos. There's some more as well, but never mind. Let me see if I can do presenter mode and then screen share. That's probably going to be easiest. So this is an awesome cartoon. You know, really, there you go. Our blessed homeland, our glorious leader, our great religion, our noble populace, and our heroic adventurers, versus their brutish invaders, their backward savages, their primitive superstition, and their wicked despot. So really, you know, an awful lot we see of bad thinking about other crypto projects is really nothing unique to blockchain. It's just human psychology of seeking another, that other people have different visions, different priorities, you know, different values, and demonizing them is a very easy thing to do. You know, it's hard to get yourself in other people's frames of mind. And it's the simplest thing in the world to think, well, you know, how could you possibly think that, you know, you must either be mad or you must be bad. And this is what we see happening endemically in blockchain, where, you know, other projects are obviously scams and they're complete idiots, and that, you know, it will never happen, and so on. So I mean, where I always go back to is thinking, well, you know, why are you involved with the blockchain community in the first place? And I think the answer for an awful lot of people is a very simple one: is seeing, you know, value in decentralization of bringing the controls back on our side. You know, putting the hand in, putting power back in the hands of the users. I mean, speaking for myself, after the financial crisis, I did an awful lot of reading about, well, you know, what's happening here? Well, you know, how can are we just puppets to these people? And, you know, well, how does money even work anyway? You know, what are these elites? How does power and politics work? And you know, how can things get screwed up so badly? And an obvious answer, you know, an obvious sort of reaction is just despair, just thinking, well, you know, run to the hills. There's nothing that can be done. But for myself, when I first started getting into blockchain, it was really the thought, well, you know, I'm an engineer. You know, maybe I can help. You know, rather than despairing, there's something very positive I can do to build an alternative. And I think that nearly everyone involved in blockchain, certainly early on, is coming from a similar kind of mindset. You know, they want to make a better world, but we're just pursuing parallel paths. There's video. Come on. So yeah, I mean, for many people, you know, it started with Bitcoin, the idea of a peer-to-peer cash system, which was rapidly followed on, well, not rapidly, 4 years later on by Ethereum, and really Vitalik's observation that lots of these Bitcoin 2.0 projects at the time that were trying to do, you know, colored coins, name coins, or so on, were really striving for a separation of the application and the platform. That really what you needed was a general computing platform, and that was what Ethereum was. You know, a pattern very similar to Windows or Android or Linux or the web or any other of these platforms is abstraction, and providing something to build on top of. So from the Ethereum white paper, you know, the goals there: simplicity, universality, modularity, agility, non-discrimination, and non-censorship. And I think, you know, those are very uncontroversial aims that many blockchain projects are also aiming for. So this was an early photo of Vitalik, Jeff, and Gav. I think this was actually the first time that they were in the same location, hacking on some stuff together. It had started, I've got it on the next slide there. So yeah, just here, you know, Vitalik tweeted out a little while ago the earliest emails from Gav reaching out to me in December 2013. So he says, so Gav says, Johnny gave me the heads up. I can do C++. How far are you with Ethereum? So Vitalik had written an early version of the white paper, shared it around, you know, mailing lists and passed on from hand to hand. And then at the very tail end there of 2013, Gav had started there on C++ client, Jeff in the middle on the Go client. Vitalik was doing Python client. And then shortly afterwards, Gav started on the yellow paper, and you know, they'd really got that triangulation between those multiple clients and the spec, and on they went. And then in February 2014, you had Ethereum really sort of launched at Bitcoin Miami, the North American Bitcoin conference, where Vitalik did about a half-hour presentation on it there, and that was really where it kind of hit the mainstream consciousness within blockchain, at least. And then Vitalik getting mobbed shortly afterwards. I think that's Joe Lubin next to him there, the bald guy, and so apparently everyone, you know, immediately went out of the meeting, and then they're mobbing this guy. At some point I ran into a dude who was doing the presentation in the same room next, and like there was nobody left. Everyone just left the room, followed Vitalik. This again was at that same conference. So on the front row, you can see here, you know, Gav, Vitalik, Anthony Diorio, Taylor Gehring, and on the back row there, you've got Charles and Joe Lubin in at the back, and various other folk. These are some photos from a couple of months later in Toronto at the Bitcoin Expo in April 2014. So again, you know, Vitalik, Jeff Wilker in the background, Anthony looking on, and far left there's a guy called Amir Shetrit, who's been a little bit lost to history. He's the least known sort of founder. And then at the very back there, you've got Richard Wild, who joined IOHK. He was one of the guys who worked on the video that you just saw and on the early website. And Joe, you know, all very happy days here. Everyone's very friendly. You know, you've got everyone there. Ian Meikle on the far left, who's the graphic designer who does the main website and did a load of the graphics for previous DevCons. But then you had the first schism, which was, I believe it was about May 2014, where you had about 4 of the founders who were techies and 4 who were businessy sort of people. And what happened is basically the techies chucked out all the business people. You know, they had these irreconcilable differences really about the approach. You know, was it going to be a for-profit business that was centralized and then built the platform and then open sourced and released it later, or was it going to be a foundation from the start and done in a decentralized form? Because really the original plan had been to have a for-profit business in Switzerland, to have a foundation in Canada, but then they all ended up going to Switzerland and basically had this you know, this sort of rebellion where Charles Hoskinson got sacked, who had been the CEO. You had others following him. Amir left. Anthony Diorio ended up leaving, and Joe Lubin kind of hung around to support things, and then later left. So you had these sort of lesser schisms in the summer of 2015, where Joe and Anthony had basically kind of, you know, they'd been following along. It wasn't the original plan, but they were still trying to help Joe more so. But then went off and left the foundation for proper and started up on Consensus. But you have these schisms. You know, the third schism was in late 2015 when Gav left the foundation and started Parity. And really what was happening at that time was the foundation had nearly run out of money. Towards the tail end of that year, they were down to 4 months worth of runway left. You know, it looked like in early 2016, the money was all going to run out. You know, it wasn't going to get finished, so they had to reduce the runway. They pretty much all the C++ team got let go. Spending got reduced on the others. All funding for Swarm and Whisper stopped. And then Gav and some of the people on that C++ team formed Parity, and then you've got these Geth versus Parity tensions that you see popping up, you know, all the time. Of you know, really Peter and Gav really don't seem to like each other. Though I found out later they never actually directly worked together. Peter started after Gav had already left, but there we go. And then, you know, you've also got that, you know, you've got the Web3 Foundation, you know, which could be seen as, you know, a bit of a rival of the EF. And then there was the fourth schism, which I myself was sort of involved with, where when you've got Hyperledger starting up in late 2015, and then the EEA in early 2017. So I'd spent 5 months in 2016 trying to get the C++ client that I'd joined the foundation by that time, trying to get that relicensed as Apache, so we could have had it contributed into Hyperledger. So we could have had this bridge built between Hyperledger and Ethereum sides in 2016, of really saying, well, hey, you want to do some enterprise stuff? Well, great, go talk to our partners at the Linux Foundation. You want to do public Ethereum stuff? Well, talk to the Ethereum Foundation. But there's a sort of demonization there as well. Of well, what are you guys doing working with the banks? So you end up with at least 6 factions and stereotypes within the Ethereum ecosystem. So this I wrote for the Ethereum Community Conference in March of this year in Paris. So you've got the Ethereum Foundation, which is obviously Vitalik's kingdom, where he is the dictator that runs everything, and he single-handedly bailed out the DAO to save him and his friends. You've got Cardano and Mantis and IOHK and Ethereum Classic with Charles Hoskinson, being the ultimate demon who was cast out of the foundation, and then he's coming back with Classic trying to fuck things up. You've got Joe Lubin as an empire builder who only cares about money. Consensus, they're just fucking gorillas that just want to take everything over and are pumping everything. You've got Parity in the Web3 Foundation with Gav, and Gav's egotistical and non-collaborative, and again Parity with a wallet hack. They just want their money back, and it's all self-serving. You've got Decentral with Anthony Diorio and Jax, and Anthony's just an opportunist who only cares about money. He didn't do anything, he's just there at the start. And you've got Hyperledger and the EEA with myself and Amber Balday and Joe and others who are obviously just trying to co-opt Ethereum for the banks and the status quo and sell everything out. And I mean, all of these are obviously just demonizations. There's no truth to them. They're just different people, different priorities, but so aligned. And really, under our tent, we have people who could be labeled as autistic, sociopathic, egotistical, chronic social anxiety, severe depressive, suicidal, greedy, and selfish. But on the upside, autistic, genius, altruistic, visionary, selfless, and fearless. Because I mean, the reality is that when Ethereum or many of these projects started, they were complete moonshots. There was no certainty that any of this stuff was going to work out. And people who are neurotypical mainstream people don't do these things. You're not going to go and leave some good job and go off on this crazy mission to see if this thing can happen. If you're kind of risk adverse and status quo. So what you always have in these frontier technologies is very atypical people who have this ability to just batter through and find new stuff. But often on the downside, well, they're hard to work with. They don't have good interpersonal skills. They don't have good conflict resolution. And, they're mainly guys, they're mainly dudes, mainly young dudes who just, stomp all over each other, piss each other off, and they hate each other. And this is really the legacy that we've got. Is these old stories from 4 years ago have still got their echoes in these groups who, you see people just taking pot shots at each other. So yeah, I mean, here's my truth: is that diversity is strength, and everyone's got a big mixture of good and bad traits. But I mean, even good and bad, I mean, that's a value judgment in itself. Because I mean, we're all misfits in some way or another. Typical people wouldn't have embarked on this journey, and really, especially over the last year or so, as the leadership at the foundation was about to change, as Ming was leaving and Aya was coming in as the new executive director, I ended up digging into a lot of this history, you know, trying to understand, well, how did Ming, you know, how did she get appointed, and, you know, how did the foundation get created, and what were the different boards, and, like, you know, how has all this stuff worked? What have been the phases that this stuff has gone through? Because you know, told a lot of stories, you know, like, oh, you know, Gav's terrible, and Charles was this, and Vinay did that, and, you know, Stefan Tawal was this, and blah, 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 blah. And, you know, as I dug into it and ended up talking to these people a lot more, you know, my conclusion is there's no bad guys in any of this. It's just a bunch of dudes trying the best, you know, just imperfect people. And the thing is that you look at Ethereum, and it's succeeded beyond any, you know, realistic expectation. You know, looking back 4 years, to think, well, you know, how would it be if pretty much every major company is looking at your technology? You know, if you're talking to governments and regulators, and the thing has become as big as it has, and, you know, whatever, 94% of things are getting built on top of it. You know, it's an unbelievable success. So really, there's no need for these people, you know, to hate each other. You know, everyone's played their role. Everyone's just tried their best. And I think that, you know, an awful lot of this tribalism is really not fact based. You know, it's just blockchain religion. And you know, I fell foul to this myself as well. You know, I was spending this time in 2016 working on relicensing of the C++ client, and you know, that ended up getting blocked in the end by Gavin Wood. And at the time, you know, I thought, you know, I thought really badly of him. You know, it's like, how can you be so selfish that you'd block this thing that can have such a huge advantage for everyone? And I'm just sort of going to flip that through that. But I mean, you know, the long and short of it is I came to understand over time that, you know, it was really just fear of the beautiful dream getting subverted. You know, that what would happen if you let these companies in at that early stage. But 2018 isn't the same as 2014. It's not the same as 2016 either. It's a very different kind of landscape now. So yeah, at DevCon 3, I got to spend time with Gav, you know, just like 10 minutes in person. But that was the first time I'd ever spoken to him, despite having interacted with him, you know, for quite a while. Because I think the thing is that face-to-face stuff is so different from, you know, talking to people on the internet, that you can just form these bad impressions of people based on partial and secondhand information. So I think in-person stuff is just so important. And then yeah, this February I went to Berlin. You know, went on a bit of a peace mission to see Parity and Gav, and spent the day with the team, and then the evening with Gav and Jutta, and I gave him some maple syrup, because this is what I've been doing. You know, I've been going around the world gifting people maple syrup. You know, here you go, a gift from Canada, and yeah, you know, we basically talked about all this stuff that we just never spoke about at the time, because, you know, you're just sort of working off what you think somebody's values and ideas are, but if you don't speak to them, if you don't, you know, really meet them in person, it's very, very easy to think badly of people, and it's usually based on false premises as well. So I started this, you know, over the early months of this year, really looking at tribalism within Ethereum, but you know, the same behavior is happening again and again across blockchain. You know, your project is a scam, you are idiots, you know, this is an attack. The innovation is seen as an attack. I mean, especially within Bitcoin, and, you know, you see the blockchain size sort of debate, and Bitcoin Cash and so on. And you just think, you know, how much better would the Bitcoin ecosystem have been if, rather than having sort of 2 years of just shouting at each other on the internet, somebody had just hard forked and made, made a large block size one and measured it. We seem to have forgotten how science works, which is nobody knows the answer. So why don't you try things and see what happens? So rather than trying to say, well, look, you're attacking the protocol, you guys are just trying to take over. You obviously don't value decentralization because this is going to affect things, so therefore you're evil. Just do it and measure it. That science works through experimentation, and through facts. In our quest to build the perfect machine, we've forgotten to be human. Something that Texture, Anthony D'Onofrio, who was one of the first community guys on Ethereum, said during the time of the DAO fork was, and he was trying to understand the psychology of what you'd got on, sort of Cody's law versus the main Ethereum side, and trying to understand how people get so dug in about things. And his conclusion really was that, well, who would be incentivized to work on trust minimization systems? Who would be a typical kind of group of people who would have been involved with Bitcoin early and blockchain early? And it's people with trust issues. Like most people, don't care about this stuff at all. So what you do end up getting, and it's the same with cryptographers, it's the most conspiratorially minded, paranoid people, are actually the best at doing care. And that gets you so far. But then you get to where we are now of going, well, great, yeah, that really worked. Okay, so how are we going to apply this to the world? How are we going to scale this up? And that then becomes a social issue. The social scaling is a lot harder than the technical scaling. Is really, how do you engage with a broader set of people? Because as you get broader and broader, you get more and more different value systems. You don't have the same uniformity of beliefs. You don't have basically, here are middle-aged white, fairly privileged, generally North American dudes who are probably, quite libertarian-y, crypto-anarchisty. The world doesn't look like that. So yeah, I mean, we need to show leadership, I think, within Ethereum, where I think we have got, a lot more of the pragmatic kind of people. I mean, I wasn't really involved with Bitcoin before Ethereum, but I would say that in general, the core people in the middle of Ethereum were a lot more mainstream technologist people who, want social impact and a better world. That would be a characterization of the Ethereum, where Bitcoin were more hard money, but as we go forward, you'll get a broader and broader thing. Anyway, I think, we're in a position within Ethereum, because of how widespread it is, how large a part of the blockchain ecosystem it is now, to really model better behavior and say, well, look, we need to move beyond this tribalism, and we do need to work together, and really then try and extend that system, that pattern across the whole of blockchain. And that's what myself and others have been doing really this year. I think I've seen more and more collaborative activity than I have through my whole time in the ecosystem, really. And I think a part of that as well is that it's worked. We're not really having to say, well, is blockchain a thing? Might there be some value there? Is this just a fad? We're way beyond that, and we're really onto more technical implementation issues of saying, well, great, how do we get from where we are to the scaling that we need? How do we basically make this thing into something that you can build impactful stuff on top of? Because really you could blow away pretty much all of blockchain tech that exists in the world right now, and it wouldn't really impact things very much. There's nothing very, very weight bearing on top yet. Lots of proof of concepts, lots of interest, but not really. We don't really have production systems. But that really is more of a implementation and execution. We're not where we are of really being in this embattled kind of place, where I think a lot of this tribalism has come from, was really that for a long time it's like, well, this whole thing is bullshit, but you sort of have to turn off the turn off your shields a little bit. You had these shields around you for ages going, well, I'm not going to listen. Everyone just says the thing's a scam, so we're actually just doing work and we've got to ignore external input. I think we're now at a place where everyone needs to become a little bit more receptive to other people with other skills coming to the table. So at EdCon in May in Toronto, we had the first Ethereum Classic talk. So Anthony Lusardi there came and spoke about where Classic was, and I actually went to Korea at the end of July, and I spoke at the Ethereum Classic Summit. So that was awesome, and got to meet and spend time with Charles and with Barry Silbert and with Igor, who's the ETC dev lead guy, who only 2 years ago I was in the foundation. I was on the side of evil in their view. The evil foundation, bailing everything out. But 2 years on, we're brothers, and it's good, and we're not exactly aligned on everything. So here you go. This is Splix, Igor, the Classic lead. On the right there is Darcy Reyno, who is the program manager for ETC Dev. He lives in Vancouver as well, and he's a great guy. He used to work at EA as well, though we went on the same sort of teams. And then Anthony Lusardi on the left there is the guy who was speaking at EdCon. So he works for the ETC Cooperative, which is a group funded by Grayscale, which is the investment trust under Digital Currency Group that Barry Silbert runs. So Ermengun Sira here in April said, no single coin will moon by itself. Either the entire ensemble goes up together, or they all mop the floor mired in regulations, scams, and lawsuits. It's essential for the communities to work together. I mean, this was said in April, well before, the giant ongoing crash that we've had. I actually do really welcome the market crashes, because it's flushing out all the shit and the scams. It's great. People are actually doing real work. All these people who've shown up late last year or early this year, and not contributing a lot of value, are moving off their way. Same deal with the regulators getting involved. I do welcome that as well, though it's all a bit heavy-handed and rough right now. But we do really need clarity, to say, well, hey, this is a new category of stuff. It doesn't exactly fit the existing rules. But what you want to do is marry that innovation with suitable consumer protections, and find a way to use the tech to improve the way we work, in the same way as happened for all previous technical waves. Used to be the case that we did everything on paper, and then it's like, oh, here comes the telegraph. Can we use the telegraph? Can we use phones? Can we use fax machines? Can we use the internet? So I think, an awful lot of the regulation is going to sort of involve adding "and blockchain" as a clause on the end of a whole bunch of existing regulation around the world. That digital signatures will become as acceptable as other things. But really, that correlation is very true, that that this zero-sum thinking of saying, well, which blockchain is going to win, is an incredibly naive kind of view. You're not going to have some single public chain and everything on the world is on that, whatever the winner. That makes no more sense than when relational database were invented in the 70s, saying, well, we're going to have the world database. Would you like me to add some rows to the database for you? Or the corporate form invented, would you like to buy shares in the company? No, that's what the DAO did. that didn't work so well. Kent Barton wrote this great article again in April, Divided We Fail, the irrational insanity of crypto tribalism. Distributed computing can change the world for good if we get out of our own way. As he says, calm, academic, respectful discussion is all too often substituted with emotional, personal attacks and overly simplified narratives. Consider how adherents from opposing groups tend to view these subjects. Bitcoin, a Ponzi scheme. Ethereum is a centralized cult. EOS is scammy vaporware. Cardano is scammy vaporware. And Bitcoin Cash is a malicious fork led by Satan himself. To an outsider, it must seem ludicrous to watch countless smart minds working on blockchain technology, descend into bickering. It's quite true. I mean, it's sort of laughable from the outside. So yeah, since November of last year, I've engaged with, just about everyone really, because we are all in it together. And I think, we're still in such early days as well. Nobody knows what's going to work and what isn't going to work, and we're all just building things. Patterns will emerge. John Walpott, who was previously one of the main leaders at IBM Blockchain and now works for Consensus on their government technology, has a great characterization where he talks about stateful internet. Really, the idea that all of these techs that are being built are really, it's analogous to what happened with the internet, where you had this, this protocol for passing messages around. But the thing is that none of that was stateful. All of the state has ended up staying within databases, and that you've really got these siloed web on top of a database thing, and it's really just been humans that are connecting these things together. But really, you could see all of these patterns, really, whether they be, ledgers or state machines. That you want to connect these together to really get to a stateful internet where the state doesn't lie within a given company's silo, that it can, live out there. Though living out there doesn't mean it has to be in a single monolithic chain, that really you're going to have the same kind of variety as you have in any technical system or in any human system in the whole of history. The idea that a single swoosh, you're going to have a single pattern that works for everyone. I mean, it's just ludicrous. There's a reason we have different languages, different countries, different cultures, many companies, and so on. Is people have different priorities. You see this failure in politics. We'll try and pick a single policy that makes 300 million people in the US happy. It's an impossible task. There's no way you can do that. What can work is you do have more uniformity within smaller, more localized groups, and then you federate the thing up. And that's exactly, I think, what's going to happen with the techs here, is that you will have permissionless and you will have permissioned, and you'll have public and private and consortium, and you're going to have side chains and child chains, and you're going to have integration in with centralized solutions as well. It's not going to be the case that everything in the whole world is going to end up being on a blockchain. You hear people saying, oh, the world computer, that sounds very powerful. Could you run websites and things on that? No, it would be a dreadful solution. It's perhaps as much as 100 million times more expensive to run something on chain as it is on a single AWS instance. Getting global consensus on an event is an incredibly expensive thing to do. And it makes sense for some things, like ownership of important large assets. but you're not going to like have every button click that anyone in the whole world does anywhere, being recorded on a global, immutable, stored forever system. It's just ludicrous. But what is quite likely is that we will have, a degree of interoperability between all of these things, and you'll have this rich ecosystem that gets built up where solutions are picked depending on your needs. What you're trying to do. Maybe you should do this, that, and the other. I mean, something that was a real sort of belief at the start of the EA was that if you look at all public and private and consortium sort of scenarios, that there was no reason why a suitably modular Ethereum code base shouldn't be able to serve all of those different needs. That really these were just parameterization choices. That if you have suitable modularity and plugins and options and so on, that this ends up being like configuring a router or something. Internet intranet kind of equivalence is likely to be the case. But even that was just looking within Ethereum. And you have a broader set of protocols now, which are going to have uses. This was DogeCon. It was the event of the year here in Vancouver. So at the tail end of last year, when everything was mooning, you suddenly had people who were Dogecoin millionaires. They'd had their Doge for years, just messing around, and all of a sudden it was worth something. So the question is, well, what do you do? So some people were like, well, quick, spend it quick before it crashes, and they ended up sort of having these grants, this competition, saying, hey, what are doji kind of things that we should do? Let's spend the money. And one of them was let's have an unconference. We should have a Doge conference. So that's what we did there in Vancouver, and that was awesome. Because probably the Doge community is the least money oriented there is. It's kind of like the cryptocurrency for people who don't care about money. So that was a lot of fun. Wonder Woman movie in 2017. I used to want to save the world, to end war and bring peace to mankind, but then I glimpsed the darkness that lives within their light. I learned that inside every one of them will always be both. The choice each must make for themselves, something no hero will ever defeat. And now I know that only love can truly save the world. So I stay, I fight, and I give for the world I know can be. This is my mission now, forever. And really, I think that is a pretty deep truth. Is everyone has a mixture of characteristics, and demonizing anyone as being good or bad is not really very helpful. Everyone has a mixture of these characteristics. We're all imperfect humans, and ultimately the way that we're going to make any of these projects successful is working together. Is recognizing that we've got an awful lot more in common than we all have difference. And where we do have difference, just let people do their thing. Don't throw shit at them. Just let them do their thing. You do your thing. But there's huge overlap in the middle where if we build bridges across these communities and collaborate on things, we can make an awful lot more progress than if we're just redundantly building these things. And I think the EA Hyperledger announcement recently is going to be an incredibly pivotal step forward on that, where the Linux Foundation is providing uniformity of licensing and of IP policy, and it's providing mature governance and process for allowing people who are frenemies to work together. This pattern of having an open core and open source base on which you build a commercial ecosystem on top, while sharing the effort on the foundations is a fantastic kind of pattern. And I'm very hopeful that what we can see, in the coming months and years is really increased collaboration on things which are common across all blockchains, that those network layers and data structures and consensus algorithms and cryptography, all of these things are very, very common. And it would be incredibly helpful if we could, rather than trying to build, a full stack for each of these, where the very first thing you get asked is, well, what stack are you using? What tech are you using? And as a result of that, you end up talking to completely separate groups of people, building using totally different tools and languages and so on, and you just have no synergy. Again, heading into the EA, the thought was that if you've got all of these businesses wanting to build blockchain tech, well, wouldn't it be useful if they were using the EVM, if they were using Solidity, if we could share all of that tooling and effort, irrespective of how the stuff was deployed? So we're kind of getting there. So yes, be nice. For true love is inexhaustible, and the more you give, the more you have. Anyway, you are not a pawn. We are not pawns, and we can change the world. We just need to do it together. And then I have the final video.
Cool. I'll cue that up.
Right. There we go. Ta-da!
Thanks, Bob. That was great.
So ask me anything about anything. I've got to go in about 10 or 15 minutes, but free to field anything about anything.
Yeah, we're gonna turn on the light.
Okay.
Cool. That was awesome. Yeah, that was a great history lesson. I liked. I really liked how you mentioned Dogecoin, and they're like how they don't care about money, because that's how I started in crypto. Really, I mean, I had some Bitcoin, but like what made me serious about it was Dogecoin in particular. Was like, that feeling in your stomach that you get when you do a very large transaction in like a cryptocurrency. I never felt that with Dogecoin.
No.
Because if I burned my Dogecoins, it really didn't matter all that much in the scheme of things. Yeah. And so I got practice and I got to learn about Dogecoin. While I kind of couldn't be part of Bitcoin because they were like very serious investors, and that's my take on it.
There was a stat just a couple of months ago, which is Doge was doing more daily transactions than Bitcoin Cash.
That's great. How was DogeCon?
It was awesome. So maybe 200 people, something like that. Lots of people from around the world. So Jackson Palmer came, Mr. Doge himself. And it was funny because he was saying he really enjoyed it because he was a bit, incognito. He wasn't really like, here's the keynote or anything like that. He was just lurking, and a bunch of people didn't know who he was. Like he was just, he's just another dude hanging out. So a real kind of contrast from, you sort of pumpy, hey, look at my project, woo woo. It's just people talking about tech. And we had, I did an opening session talking about neurodiversity and forgiveness and reconciliation. And we had a bunch of sort of crypto economic talks, really talking about, well, what's the big picture that we're trying to do here. And so yeah, I mean, it was a good mixture of serious topics and just fun, stupid, mimetic shit stuff. And there was like a I don't know what they called it, sort of like a debate sort of like a funny style debate where you've got the sort of different coins. So it's like, right, someone's got to argue for Ethereum Classic over Ethereum, or Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash, and you know, argue for Doge, or so yeah, it was just yeah, there was a fair bit of sort of arts and broader sort of cultural material as well. So I guess a bit like you see at Ethereal or something like that, you know, some of that stuff. But yeah, just fun. Oh, and then the other thing that was a massive highlight is, I don't know if you've seen Decentralized Dance Party. You ever seen Decentralized Dance Party? Okay, I will drop you. I'll tell you what. I'll just find this video because you've got to watch this. It's awesome. So Decentralized Dance Party is, I'm not going to explain it because it's just, I can't explain it. I've just got to show you something. So it's basically like a bit of a flash mobby kind of thing. And they have these events all over the world. Oh, come on. Okay. So I'm just going to drop you the link here on LinkedIn, okay?
Right.
What is a DDP?
A decentralized dance party.
How does it work?
We push play on a hot track on our iPod, send it through an FM radio transmitter. We tune a battery-powered boombox to the party broadcast.
How many stereos can you transmit to?
1,
2,
3,
or 300.
If you imagine that, but somebody made a gigantic moon as well. So we were like pushing the moon around downtown, having this roving dance mob around it, and, you know, rockets on their backs. So that's quite an experience. But there you go, Dogecoin. It may be a one-off event. It may never happen again. Who knows?
That's great. Really great. Yeah, really thanks for talking to us, Bob. I appreciate it.
No worries.
We can't get
so I hope some of you are going to be in Prague.
I keep twisting everyone's arm here to go, but I think it's just going to be me.
Just you?
Yeah.
Are you just DevCon, or are you going to go to some other bits and pieces as well around it?
So I got waitlisted on the Ethereum Magicians one, but then I got acceptance, and then I missed the window, so reapply. But yeah, I think that's. I know there's like a few going on. I was gonna throw a party or something, but now I think I have to throw a decentralized dance party.
You do. Well, I'll tell you, we've got to have that happening in Prague.
Yeah. Oh, there is one already set up.
I don't know, but we should do.
Yeah, let's do it, dude. I'm for it.
We should. We absolutely should.
Yeah.
I don't know if you saw that there's a crypto train from Berlin to Prague as well. You see that?
No.
Because you've got like the Web3 summit is in Prague. Sorry, in Berlin on October 22nd to 24th, and there's some other things around that. So then, like, they're doing a let's all go on the train together from Berlin to Prague in the middle. There'll be like hundreds and hundreds of people like on the same train, you know, like, and sort of like different, like this is the, you know, this is the status carriage, this is the parity carriage, you know, come and hang out on the crypto train.
That's so awesome.
What for future years, like, what's the secret? How do you get a ticket? Because
to what?
Yeah, like for future year reference, like for future years, how do you get a ticket to DEF CON? Because
do it really, 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 really early. Just FOMO it to fuck. Like, that's the only way. Though I think really the trick this year was builder tickets. Like those that was the best real option for most people. Is if you're doing something, well, apply for a builder ticket. Like, they were prioritizing those over the public. You know, basically the public sales, it's just like the demand is like just off the charts. Like, it was crazy for DevCon 2 in Shanghai in 2016. You know, on DevCon 3 they were sold out, you know, quick, but quick being like a week or whatever. You know, it was like, right, they're really, you know, here we're releasing the tickets like 4 months in advance, and some people are like, oh, there's ages to go, and it's like, no, there fucking isn't. Like, get them now. But they did sell out really fast. But then this year, I mean, they've been gone in minutes, right? Haven't they, on the waves?
yes.
It's you know, I guess this is like the pattern now, and it's going to be like, you know, like Apple WWDC tickets or like Google I/O or whatever. It's like, oh, can you get a ticket to the event?
Right. Are they like resellable at all? Because that may be part of the problem. Okay.
No.
Well, dang.
No, I don't think anyone's hoarding them. Like, they're not transferable. They've, you know, last couple of years it's been like they are for the person on the ticket, right? You know, you're not having resales. You know, you can't transfer them if you're like, hey, I can't come anymore. My co-worker's coming or whatever. Like, they're not going to be arseholes that way. But
are there, you know, like so for people who you know, you snooze, you lose, I guess. Is there any like volunteer stuff like to help out with the thing?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, there's volunteering at DevCon, or the other thing as well. And I saw this at New York Blockchain Week in May of this year, like around consensus, is increasingly people are going along but like not getting tickets to the conference, because it's kind of like, well, okay, so you can go there and here's a presentation on something, and it's like, well, who gives a shit? Like, you can see all that shit on YouTube later anyway. Like, really, the value is actually like meeting people, and like you got a load of people in that city, and you're all going to be going to the bars and pubs, or people hanging out and having meetings or whatever. Like, you don't have to be inside the conference for it to have value. And especially there in Prague, you know, you've got magicians, and you've got like, you know, Pegasus Hackathon, you know, afterwards, and Status one before, and like there's going to be a bunch of other like side events, and or just like, you know, there'll be like Telegram groups. Hey, where is everyone? Like, you know, just you're going to have so many people there that you know, just being there is like you're going to meet people and stuff. I don't think, you know, having a ticket is required for it to be worthwhile. I mean, what you saw actually in New York was, it was sort of like, you know, so Consensus itself, it was a zoo. Like, I was in there, it's 8,500 people, you know, it's just insane crowds. And the other thing as well is that, it's kind of like at that scale, it's kind of like it's not for us anymore. You know, it's kind of like for the general public. It's for people that don't really know a lot, especially consensus was like it was awful, to be honest. Like there was a guy sitting next to me in one of the keynotes who was like from Amway, and it's like, oh my God, like the multi-level marketing people are here, like they think it's for them. Or like my girlfriend who you know used to work as an accountant was like, you know, fucking hell, they're here. All the business people I've run away from, they found us, you know. Like all the shit, all the corporate shit that you're trying to get away from, like, here you go, they've all turned up.
I gotcha. Yeah, you can still ride the crypto train even if you don't have a ticket to the conference. I gotcha.
Yeah.
How crazy are crypto parties though, right?
Absolutely, yes.
So I have like a kind of a random question. I noticed
Sure.
on one of your slides you had, I think it was one of your Twitter posts, and you said you're just kind of citing examples like, hey, you know, like the, I guess like that inclusivity is like a, you know, it sometimes needs to be like a conscious act, but specifically you're calling out, you know, kind of like yourself as an example that you worked with all these teams recently, and I noticed you called out Fabric separately from Hyperledger. And it may just be like my ignorance, but I thought of those as like, you know, Hyperledger was like the umbrella, and then you got Fabric, Sawtooth, like, you know, Indie, all these different things. Why are they separate?
Yeah, so I mean that's a very common misperception, right? Is people say, "Oh, we're building on Hyperledger," right? That's a really common thing. Oh, what are you? We're using Hyperledger. Like that doesn't actually make sense. It's a wrong. It's an incorrect statement. You know, Hyperledger is a Linux Foundation project, which is an umbrella for multiple blockchain projects. So there are like 5 top-level projects. You've got Fabric, which was initially made by IBM but contributed in, and I think they're about, you know, there may be about 55% of the contributions are IBM now, and, you know, lots of other people working on it. You've got Sawtooth that was originally done by Intel. You've got Burrow, which is an EVM, but a permissioned EVM that was made by Monax. You've got this one called Iroha, which is sort of a more IoT-ish Japanesey thing. You've got Indie, which is a sovereign, you know, self-sovereign identity thing. But then you've got a bunch of other things like Composer and Caliper and so on, you know, so a bunch of different projects. And the thing is that over time, you know, there will be more and more projects in there. So I'm really trying to push for more and more Ethereum things to be contributed in as top level projects. But yeah, like Hyperledger, you know, is not the same as Fabric and is not the same as IBM blockchain. You know, all of these things are different. You know, that Fabric is an open source project. IBM is one of the commercial vendors of that, but there are others. You know, you can get Fabric offering through Oracle. You know, it's available on AWS or through Azure. You know, there are multiple companies that are making Fabric-based stacks, and there are multiple companies that are making Sawtooth-based stacks. And I think, you know, that's going to be just the same on the Ethereum side as well. So yeah, all of these things are quite different, and people often lazily say, oh, we're building on Hyperledger. But what that leads people to think is, oh, well, it's Hyperledger or Ethereum, where they're actually orthogonal. And that was something that was a key thing in that EA Hyperledger statement, was really, you know, a statement from Brian Bellendorf, the ED there, saying, you know, it's really Ethereum and Hyperledger. You know, it's not an either or choice. These things are separate, and you know, Hyperledger can be a great way for getting Ethereum. You know, one of the things I'm really keen to see if I can try and sort of finagle into happening is that Consensus have been building Pantheon, you know, this new Ethereum client within Pegasus, their protocol engineering group. And that's really informed by, you know, years worth of learning. You know, you're starting later. Well, you know what your use cases are a lot more, right? you know, we've had, you know, a year and a half of enterprise Ethereum. We know what consortium Ethereum chains look like. You know, Quorum's been used for quite a while. So, you know, we know what these things look like and what the architecture needs to be. So, I mean, that's another thing that's getting released at DevCon is Pantheon's getting released, and then you've got this Pegasus hackathon afterwards. And really that's based on a JVM. It's I think it's mainly built in Java. There might be a bit of Scala. They were talking about Scala earlier. I think it's ended up being in Java. But I think what you're really going to have there is kind of like an Ethereum product to a degree that we've never had before. You know, there never really has been an Ethereum product, and I think that's where IBM has really done well, and R3 with Corda as well, is really having a thing that you can sell. You know, that you can go to a business and say, "Oh, right, do you want to buy a blockchain offering? Here you go. It's enterprise grade. It's well documented. It's tested. It's modular." You know, we'll support you. You know, it's not just like, hey, here's a project up on GitHub, run it, and good luck, go make it out. You know, so I think what you're going to start seeing with Pantheon and others is really, you know, what you saw on the Linux side is, oh, you want to buy a Red Hat? Here you go. You know, it's that step up of saying, well, yeah, it's the same stuff, it's the same kernel, it's the same base tech. But, you know, you can buy a thing that we're going to support, and you're going to have certainty, you know, on provenance and licensing. And, you know, you're not going to get screwed with patents or have someone coming trolling you. And, you know, it's a thing that you can really build stuff on top of. You know, it's really getting to that next level of maturity that you really saw, I guess, with the web as well, where you went from like Mosaic to like, well, look here, you've got Internet Explorer and Chrome and Firefox and so on, right? That you have got the common protocol, but a lot of the heavy lifting is going to get done by serious companies. You know, it's really the transition from that, you know, those amateur roots into it being like a really professional thing. And that isn't co-opting. It's just recognizing this stuff matters. It's really big and hard, and it's like a job to maintain it, you know, and you need big teams and proper funding and stuff, right? You know, it's great that you've got a bunch of guys that basically like did a research project and it went live, like, you know, well done guys. But it's like, you know, here come the pros, right? You need help now. You can't like the Get team, for instance. It's, you know, it's only like 6 people or something. Tiny little team.
That was a great talk. You're about out of time, or?
I am. I'm gonna have to make a move. My turkey awaits.
Yeah. What's the name for Canadian Thanksgiving?
Thanksgiving.
Oh, no way. Okay, but okay, right on. Okay, you just
Thanksgiving.
I thought y'all had like Boxing Day or something, right?
Yeah, but yeah, and you know, I don't know if there's a particular, you know, like American Thanksgiving, it's like, oh, the first year, and you know, here we got through the winter or whatever. I don't know that there's an equivalent like Canadian story specifically, but you know, analogous, I suppose.
Right on. Well, thank you very much, Bob. We were really talking to us.
No worries, and yeah, all the best. You know, do search me out. I'm uniquely searchable. There's only one me. If you search for me, it will be me. You know, I'm on Twitter a lot. That's my primary. And all the best.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you.
Keep on blockchaining. See you later, guys.